Has the balance of power shifted at all in the Atlantic Division this offseason? Probably not.
You're Locked On Bruins, your daily podcast on the Boston Bruins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Bruins fans, and welcome back to the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast. I'm your host, Ian McLaren, and this is a daily show where we discuss all things Spoked Beat. Today is Wednesday, July 17th, and I want to thank you so much for making Locked On Bruins part of your daily routine. Free and available on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The sports aren't sportsing like we want them to during the summer months, but FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So visit FanDuel.com to get started. Before we get started, a quick reminder, you can find the podcast on X, Instagram, at Locked NHL Bruins. And you can find me, my hockey thoughts, dad jokes, at Ian C. McLaren. A bit of Bruins news that we'll touch on later. Marc McLaughlin signing a 1-year, 2-way contract. There's now officially one RFA remaining to be signed, and it's a biggie, of course. But let's get into the Atlantic Power Rankings and assess whether the balance of power has changed at all in this division since free agency. And we'll start at the bottom and work our way up as we usually do. And in 8th place, the rebuilding Montreal Canadiens remain at the bottom of the Atlantic. They made a significant move by locking up first overall pick, Yaroslav Slafkovsky, to an 8-year contract extension. But as successful as they've been in the draft and adding prospects, they're still probably behind the other 7 teams in the Atlantic Division. And I mean, Montreal, they are going to be a team to be reckoned with sooner than later, with Slafkovsky, Nick Suzuki, Cole Caulfield, adding Ivan Demidov at the draft. They've got a bevy of prospects on the blue line as well that will really put them over the top at some point. They have such an impressive group of prospects, but not quite ready to contend for the playoffs, maybe a year or two away. But if they can add a goalie, and we talked about this, I think last week, with the possibility of an offer sheet for Jeremy Swayman and what that would look like if the Canadiens made that move, that would really expedite their rebuild and maybe make them a playoff team much sooner than later. Not likely to happen. And as it stands, the Montreal Canadiens remain in 8th, but with a very, very bright future. Now, there's a trio of teams who are hoping to make the jump into playoff contention, but still might not really be there. Now, the Ottawa Senators, they have new ownership. They have new management, now new coaching staff with Travis Green in the mix. And they have, of course, a new number 1 goaltender in Linus Ullmark. A young core that should be entering their prime, and Brady Tkachuk, Tim Stützle, Drake Batherson. But they don't really have that depth, I don't think, to make up for deficiencies up front and on the blue line, especially after trading Jacob Chychrun this offseason. I still think they are a few pieces away, and Linus Ullmark's going to have a hard time replicating the success that he had in Boston now that he is in Ottawa. Obviously, he gives them a leg up, and if you have solid goaltending, I mean, that was one of the main reasons the Bruins were so successful last season. But I still think they are near the bottom of the division, as are the Buffalo Sabres, for that matter. They have the NHL's longest playoff drought, And they didn't really do much this offseason besides signing Jason Zucker and hiring Lindy Ruff behind the bench, a guy who led them to their last postseason appearance and to significant heights in the early 2000s. But again, there's still questions for this team in terms of whether or not they can take the next step. They traded Matthew Savoie for defensive forward help in Ryan McLeod. Is that enough to get them in the mix? It's going to be a tough go for the Buffalo Sabres. And they're really going to have to hit with Rasmus Dahlin, Dylan Cousins, Tage Thompson, Owen Power. I mean, they have the pieces. I would argue that they're deeper up front than the Ottawa Senators, and they certainly have a lot of firepower that took a step back last season. If they can find that offensive form and then get defense performances from those first overall picks and get goaltending from Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, and maybe Devin Levi emerges as the breakout candidate that he's meant to be, then they have a chance. But I don't know. There's still something missing there. Maybe Lindy Ruff is that spark that will get them into the playoff race. Now, the Detroit Red Wings were the other team that just missed the playoffs last year. They brought back Patrick Kane. They added two-time Cup winner now, Vladimir Tarasenko. Both of those guys kind of on the downside of their careers, perhaps. They do have an emerging star in Lucas Raymond. They have some pieces on the blue line, Mo Seider, of course. They have guys coming like Axel Sandin Palika, Dylan Larkin. They made the decision to trade Robbie Fabry, who's a favorite of mine. He was dealt to the where was he traded exactly? I can't even remember. To the Anaheim Ducks in exchange for a goaltender, Gage Alexander. He had 18 goals this past season, 32 points. That was an interesting move for them. I still see the Red Wings as kind of a bubble team, and we'll see if they're able to take that next step. That's a question for each of these teams that was on the outside looking in this past offseason. They still have a lot of money to spend, but they still have to sign Raymond as well as Seider. So those are big questions for them. And the other question is whether the goaltending can stack up. They do have 4 goalies. They took a flyer on Jack Campbell. They signed Cam Talbot. They still have Ville Husso and Alex Lyon. They're banking on one of those guys, or at least 2 of them, picking things up. If they can get value out of Jack Campbell at $775,000, that could be really something there. They signed Eric Gustafsson. I don't know if their defense is quite up to par, but they have some good pieces up front. Larkin, DeBrincat, Tarasenko, Kane. Detroit, though, I don't know if they are quite deep enough yet either. So those are the 4 bottom teams still, in my opinion. What about the top 4? Some shakeups there. How do we rank those teams? Well, we will discuss that here as the podcast continues. Today's one of those dead days in the sports calendar, and the sports aren't sportsing like we want them to here during the dog days of summer. But FanDuel lets you keep the sports going whenever you want. All you have to do is open their app and dream up bets anytime you're in the mood. This summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. There's something for everyone every day all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com to start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel is an official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Again, the All-Star game was yesterday, so not much in the way of sports today, but go check it out. Check out their sports book. There's something for everyone every day at FanDuel.com, an official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Thank you so much once again for making Locked On Bruins part of your daily routine, free and available on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. While you're on YouTube, check out Locked On Sports Today, all the latest news, opinions, and analysis from across the Locked On universe, free on YouTube and the Amazon Fire TV channels app. All right, so we distinguished, again, the top four from the bottom four in the Atlantic Division. The Canadiens, Senators, Sabres, Red Wings, all looking to move up, but still with a lot to prove and still with kind of big shoes to fill when you're looking at taking out one of the top four in the Atlantic. Now, the Tampa Bay Lightning, some big questions about this team. They traded Mikhail Sergachev. They got some decent options in return. JJ Moser, Connor Geekie, which is a top prospect. They allowed Steven Stamkos to sign with the Nashville Predators and instead invested in Jake Gensel and an extension for Victor Hedman. Who knows what kind of impact that will have on the team. He had been their captain for over a decade, led the team to some recent Stanley Cups. Quite a shock for everyone that he is not a member of the Tampa Bay Lightning, and who knows what kind of impact that will have. Andrei Vasilevsky, don't forget, pretty average last season. And there's a lot of questions about this team, how they are going to kind of react to the departure of Steven Stamkos and the addition of Jake Gensel, how long that will take him to acclimate to his new club. So kind of a team in transition at the moment, but still obviously very good with Nikita Kucherov, Braden Point, and others in the mix. The Toronto Maple Leafs did not shake up their core four. In spite of Mitch Marner trade rumors, it seemed like they were destined to do something, especially after that, Game 5 of the series against the Bruins, where they were bickering on the bench. And what ended up happening was Sheldon Keefe fired, Craig Berube came in, and they invested in some veteran defensemen like Chris Tanev and Oliver Ekman-Larsson. Tyler Bertuzzi took off for Chicago. Max Domi still in the mix. And of course, so is Austin Matthews, William Nylander, Mitch Marner, and John Tavares. The Bruins beat them in the first round. Still huge questions about this team, and I don't see them necessarily falling out of the playoff mix by any means, but I don't know if they've done much to take that next step. Losing in the first round once again, who knows? The Bruins likely still better than this team. And I put the Bruins in second in the Atlantic at the moment. Every year it seems as though teams are writing the Bruins off, or pundits are writing the Bruins off, expecting them to take a big step backwards. That was expected this past season, and they were at the top of the Atlantic for much of the regular season before losing that spot very late and ending up playing and beating the Maple Leafs in round one. They added a top-line center and a shutdown defenseman in Elias Lindholm and Nikita Zadorov. They traded Linus Ullmark, of course, but it's officially Jeremy Swayman's crease if and when they can get him signed. Not if, but more when. Perhaps when and if. There are still some needs that I've talked about extensively here on the podcast, especially when it comes to scoring. They need to add a winger or two. But I think the Bruins are still well positioned to compete in the Atlantic Division this coming season. And the additions that they made, the ages those guys are, and the commitment that was made to them, and the fact that they decided to sign with the Bruins signals they believe this can be a very competitive team over the next several years, and there's every reason to believe that's the case. Now, we can't not rank the Florida Panthers number 1. They're the defending Stanley Cup champions. They retained Sam Reinhart, who could have made a mint as an unrestricted free agent, and he signed at a pretty nice deal for them. They did lose Oliver Ekman-Larsson. They had to sacrifice Brandon Montour to the salary cap gods, but this is still a very good team. And they're the Stanley Cup champs for a reason. Should still be the class of the Atlantic Division. So really not much movement when it comes to the power rankings at the moment. Obviously, it's hard to say on paper. Everything can change once the games begin. But when it comes to ranking these teams, I'm still going to Florida, Boston, Toronto, Tampa, and then you can rank the next 3 in any way you want, but I'd probably go Buffalo, Detroit, Ottawa, and then the Montreal Canadiens as the clear bottom team as they continue to rebuild. What do you think? Hit me up on social media in the comments. Coming up as the podcast continues, we're going to discuss a signing made by the Bruins and the one remaining restricted free agent that they have to deal with. We're driven by the search for better, but when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. It's to match with Indeed. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. And Indeed doesn't just help you hire faster. 93% of employers agree Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites, according to a recent Indeed survey. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/lockedon. Go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support the show by saying you heard about Indeed on Locked On Boston Bruins. Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. The Bruins announced the signing of restricted free agent Marc McLaughlin on Tuesday. It's a similar deal to what was signed by Michael Callahan and Alec Regula just last week. A 1-year, 2-way extension worth $775,000 at the NHL level. Now, McLaughlin appeared in he's 24 years old. He appeared in 68 games with the Providence Bruins last season, 8 goals and 6 assists. Now, that was down from his production the previous year. He skated in 1 game with the Boston Bruins with 1 goal. He's played 135 career AHL games, all with Providence, with 44 total points. He was originally signed as a free agent by the Bruins in March of 2022, and a lot of people thought he could have made the team not this past season, but 2 seasons ago when they were on the verge of their record-breaking regular season. A lot of people were disappointed that he didn't make the team because he had a great camp. But there's some questions here if he's kind of a tweener, one of those classic, well, he hasn't even really lit up the AHL, so he's not really a quadruple A guy. Maybe he is just an AHLer, and that's fine. You need those guys in the organization. So we'll see if he's able to come into camp and make much of an impact, try to fight for a spot in camp, but I see that as unlikely at this point. So that leaves the Bruins with 1 remaining restricted free agent, that of course being Jeremy Swayman, and there doesn't really seem to be much in the way of updates here in terms of when a deal will be signed. I expected that once they got a deal done with Linus Ullmark to trade him to Ottawa, you would expect that a deal would have been signed pretty much right after. Like you shed that cap space. They did take some cap space on, and now they're really stuck with Eunice Korpisalo and have Brandon Bussey as the backup at the moment. So I don't know what is holding things up, why there's a delay. In my mind, it should have been pretty quick and easy to get this deal done. Neither side wanted to go to arbitration. Thankfully, we didn't want to do that again with Swayman having a bad experience this past season. But it now leaves Jeremy Swayman as the lone remaining restricted free agent. The Bruins have still about $8.3 million in available cap space. Should be enough to get it done. Maybe they want to leave some flexibility, but I mean, just sign the guy already. 8.64 is where they're at the moment. Just go 8, 7.5. That would be a real nice deal. Just get it done, and hopefully there's an update on that here in the coming days. That's it for today's episode of Locked On Boston Bruins. Tomorrow, we will do a cup check. We'll look at the top 5 teams around the NHL and assess where the Bruins rank among them and bring you all the latest on the black and gold, because that's what we do here on Locked On Boston Bruins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your favorite team every single day. I hope you're all doing well, taking care of yourselves, taking care of each other. I'll be off Friday as I'm taking the boys to a local campground for a couple nights, which should be fun. And I'll be back daily next week until the end of the month, where we'll go down to about 3 shows a week for the month of August. All right, that's it, friends. Thanks again for listening. Please subscribe if you have not already, and we'll talk to you again here tomorrow on Locked On Boston Bruins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.